There we go. Okay. So 4.5 months ago, we presented a webinar on Iran's domestic collapse. And at the end of December, remember, on the exact same day, massive demonstrations broke out in Tehran. Today's webinar, we're examining the continuing Iranian demise from within. Is it a matter of months, weeks, or days? So join us as we break it all down. I'm Yisrael Naaman of the Naaman Academy, and let's dig in. Iran, countdown to systemic collapse and the global consequences. So, if we take a look, we have to have a snapshot of where we are today. It's spoken about Iran's oil supplies and the LNG, or liquefied natural gas. This is all blockaded by the United States. True, you may have a tanker getting through here and there, but it's really not anything that's going to have a great impact. Storage facilities, as we know, will be full by the end of summer 2026 and possibly even before. As of this July, if the pumping is stopped at certain wells, you're going to have congealment of oil within the pipelines, within the system, and therefore a total breakdown. And by the way, you can't restart pumping anytime soon. It takes months, if not longer, in order to restart wells, right? It's a whole technical issue. What about water, agriculture, the energy crisis that's been spoken of before? But too many people, commentators, and mainstream media are focused on the war. What's going on internally is what's going to destroy Iran in the long term. There have been thirst protests, right? Because of the lack of water. Some cities are getting water for only 4 to 6 hours. And as much as they try to redirect water pumping, it's not doing very well. Agricultural self-sufficiency has basically failed. And there are questions of could there be a famine? Now, according to Iranian sources, they have 6 months of food storage left. But the question is, who does it go to? Those who are close to the regime or support the regime. We know that. Okay? Also, is it really 6 months worth? So, overall, you have energy and fuel collapse, refineries, electricity, and remember, you need the electricity to pump water, okay, which is in very short supply and will be even in worse shape over the summer as temperatures rise to well over 100 degrees for days on end, and sometimes up to 110. We're talking Fahrenheit here and beyond, okay? Economic bankruptcy? Well, not yet, because there is a certain internal strength to the economy. But the GDP, if we take a look, is going to drop 6% and more in 2026. It's only worth externally around $300 billion. Just to make a comparison, Israel, with 1/9 the population, has a GDP that's double that of Iran. Okay. However, if we look at it as internal production, it's actually 1.78 trillion. But that means that there has to be a lot of barter, a lot, because the currency is worthless, as we know. It's close to 2 million real to the dollar. So what do we got? Uprising, demonstrations, basic needs, and it's not even political anymore. You have 80% who outwardly oppose the regime, 15% who support it. But as we know, in recent demonstrations that are barely reported anywhere in the mainstream press, and you really have to go in and dig for them, we know that these thirst demonstrations and the breakdown of all civic services, that there are people out there who are religious as well. You see the women, and it's very obvious, right, that they too are screaming they need water. What difference does it make if you're an Islamist or not? If you don't have water, you're demanding it from the government. So we take a look. You have the Shiite eschatological response of the 12er Shiite Islam apocalypse. Now, what's the apocalypse? We have to understand here that the Iranians are going to the end in the battle against the West, especially the United States and Israel. It is an imperative, and we're talking here theologically. This is not some communist ideology or something that you can negotiate with, right? It is a theological imperative to destroy the enemies of what's called evil and injustice. Therefore, it's in quote. Big and little Satan, big Satan America, little Satan Israel. And as a divine requirement to bring about a messianic end time in Shiite 12er Islam, what you need, there must be the destruction of the state of Israel. Okay? It has to be. All right? So, who are the enemies? And who is the Messiah? The Messiah is known as the Mahdi, and it's supposed to be a Shiite Islamic global world order. Now, this world order has not come about. So the only way to handle it is in a destruction overall. Jewry, Christianity, America, all of them are obstacles to the Shiite domination. The Sunnis, who are 85, 90% of the Islamic world, are also to be subjugated or destroyed. The sanctification of death and martyrdom is there, just like we know with the Sunni jihadis that we have discussed at different times here as well. There must be a confrontation. It must go to the end time. And in that way, Allah or God is the one who makes all the decisions. It's understood that the Mahdi or Messiah is on his way after what's called occultations, that he showed up and then retreated to a cave. Okay, that's about 1,000 years ago. And the apocalypse takes place in Kirkisia, Syria, said to be not far from Damascus. And in that apocalypse, the Mahdi or Messiah and Jesus destroy the Antichrist, known as the Dajjal. And here we have a picture on the right-hand side depicting its Islamic artwork from the 1600s, depicting down below Jesus on a horse. He's considered a prophet, battling Dajjal, who is the devil. And up above in the upper right-hand corner, you see a masked individual that is the Mahdi or Messiah. Left-hand side, we have a picture of Ayatollah Khomeini, right? And he is the one who renewed and reinforced this understanding, which is believed by those who rule Iran today. And in particular, the IRGC, right, the military wing, who hold the weapons in order to try to enforce this. So what is the issue here, okay? It's paving the way to be worthy of the return of the Mahdi, meaning you have to go to war, you have to have this apocalyptic explosion to prove your worthiness, and then the Messiah or Mahdi will come. There are 5 steps. The Khomeini Revolution of 1979, and that was the vanguard of the Mahdi. In other words, you're building up for him to arrive. Khomeini, known as the jurist theologian, imposes Islamic Sharia law government. We've seen that over the past 47 years. The Iranian state, or the Shiite Islamic State, is purged of all Western influences. That's why you have the women protesting about having to cover their hair and have certain ways of dressing, and there are the morality police and on, to get rid of everything Western. And we know the regime has not been so successful at doing so, but they'll use the ultimate in force to get their way, right? The society is to be transformed, to be Islamist, Shiite, and self-sufficient. We've discussed this before. So this whole idea of self-sufficiency in agriculture, in everything, and that was the basis of the collapse of the whole water system, which we'll get into in the next few slides, right? That whatever it is, they can't import food. They have to produce it on their own, even if they're water short. And finally, the revolution is for export. You don't just keep it in Iran. It's global. And therefore, we know you have all those proxies, Houthis, Hezbollah, and Iraqi forces, which we haven't discussed that much, but we'll give it a few words today. Okay, the jihad is inevitable, and it's a theological absolute. And I can compare this more than anything else to the Shintoism in Japan that the Allies, and particularly the Americans, faced in World War II. In other words, it's not just theological underpinnings. Theology determines the direction. Okay, so here we go. When we speak of the IRGC and how they're consolidating power as Iran gets weaker, right? There's a desperation and this question. I put Armageddon. It's a Christian term for the same, last battle of good versus evil. And of course, they consider themselves good. The war with Israel and the U.S. was the last major do and die shot, and it will continue. There's going to be another round. I think most people know that. I'm convinced of it. It's not do or die, it's do and die. They've most likely come to the conclusion that there's really no way out of here except as much destruction as possible. So what does that mean? First of all, to destroy Israel, they need a nuclear weapon. And that's why Israel is following very carefully, along with the United States, the Trump administration, and saying that, reporting that apparently they're beginning to dig out the areas that were bombed, the nuclear sites. They have 60% enriched uranium. This is Israel's biggest worry, is not the massive ballistic missiles. That, from what we could see, is going to be fired at the Arab Gulf states. Because if Iran's going to go under with its oil and the inability to challenge the Islamic world in the future, they're going to take out as many of their adversaries as possible as they go under. And in particular, we know what goes on in the UAE, right? The Emirates, but it's going to be everybody else as well. The IRGC and the Basij, familiar. IRGC is that military wing. They're the commandos. The Basij are the paramilitary, if you want. They're more like a policing force that put down demonstrations, that are the ones who use as much brutality as possible against their own people. They're the ones who run the show. They have a military dictatorship. It has actually outmaneuvered the civilian apparatus. And here we see on the left-hand side the foreign minister, Arakshi, with whom the Americans have been negotiating with in Pakistan. Whatever he says or suggests or does, and along with President Pezeshkian or Galibaf, the Speaker of the Parliament, is really of no great significance. That's what gets reported in the world press, but it doesn't mean anything. Okay, he who really controls is the RG commander Vahidi, and nobody really speaks about him. But he is the intense ideologue, theologian, let's say, following the theology of the Ayatollah Khomeini, and he's the one with his finger on the button. As for this whole military class, there's really no place to go, right? They have to fight to the end. I put here, all right, no place to go and no compromise. Would he end up in Putin's Russia? You know what? There's so many outlandish things that have happened. Who knows? Maybe that would be Putin's new army, but I really doubt it. Okay, in any case, this eternal jihad is coming down to the kamikaze option. And once again, we're speaking about the Shiites, not the Sunnis. Sunnis are a different story, right? Those are the adversaries of the Shiites here, just like Israel and the United States, of which Israel have considered the first enemy to be destroyed, and then the United States. But they'll go after everyone. So, taking a look at the proxies, because everybody talks, what's going to happen with them? Well, they're very dependent on Iran. They are increasingly isolated, as we know. You probably have heard of a lot of reports coming out of Lebanon where Hezbollah power prevails, even though they started the war with Israel 2.5 years ago with well over 100,000 rockets. They're down to maybe 20%, of which I spoke with someone who's fairly expert who says, you know what, it's between 20, 30,000. That's still a hell of a lot of rockets that can be fired. And we've been getting hit every day during what's called ceasefire, okay? They also have drones and plenty of weapons and ammunition. It's a matter of whittling them down, but they had so much stockpile that it's very problematic. The Lebanese government wants them out, okay? Joseph Aoun, the president, who is a Maronite Christian, and others from the Sunni community also said, we want them out. But the Lebanese army is incapable of disarming them. Therefore, Israel is in South Lebanon. Okay. Also, there are Shiite forces or units in the Lebanese army who are more pro-Shiite Hezbollah than they are pro-Lebanon. So you really have nothing that could stop them from within. Just some diplomatic agreements, which is nice on paper and could look good, help Israel diplomatically. But in the end, Israel must physically defeat, must destroy Hezbollah. Now, they don't have the funding coming in like previously. They used to get from Venezuela. We know what happened with Maduro. There's other monies from South America, but most of the funding in the billions came from Iran. And that is not arriving the way it had been. Some here and there, we know, but far from what they need. So they're in a corner, in a crunch, but they're still alive and kicking. And we know what we say about someone, a wounded animal with their back against the wall can be very dangerous. Let's move on to the Yemenite Houthis. Iran orders them whether to attack Israel or not. So far, they've held back. Most likely, they will attack the Gulf states. Okay, they can do a lot more damage there, especially with the drones, but plenty of their rockets that have been supplied by Iran. Their rocket and drone capabilities are very much intact. True, Israel took out some, but they have plenty more. And they're threatening a blockade of the Bab el-Mandeb. We know that Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz, 20% of the world LNG and oil passes through there. Bab el-Mandeb, another 12%. We're talking about 1/3 of energy supplies worldwide being bottlenecked in two very important straits, okay, by Shiite followers of Ayatollah Khomeini. And it's going to be very difficult to do anything with the Yemenite Houthis. However, they too are dependent on Iranian funding and, more importantly, on munitions and rockets coming from Iran, which at the moment are not arriving. And then last and in a way least, okay, they had a lot of potential. Your Iraqi Shiites who were pro-Iran, they've had minor involvement over time, but have always been considered to be a bit of a wild card. And it turns out that the Americans have put a lot of pressure on the Iraqis and said, listen, we'll have nothing to do with you. You'll be in the same situation as Iran if you allow for these militias to operate. Now, 23% of oil going through the Persian Gulf comes out of Iraq. And therefore, the Americans could tell them, listen, we'll block you also. Okay? So what has happened? Muqtada al-Sadr, who is the leading Shiite cleric in political power, as well as theologically, has a lot of influence. He has declared basically a neutrality state out of this, and therefore the Iraqi state will step back. Okay. However, the Houthis, Hezbollah, they have partial independence from Iran, but they are dependent for financing. And if their fighters, terrorists, soldiers, whatever you want to call them, can't get paid, they're going to be very much weakened. So time will tell. Okay, we're taking a look at the IRGC rule versus societal breakdown. And this is the main point of our webinar today. They're running out of water. Power grid is going down. Agriculture is failing, meaning there are limited supplies. And the economy may not be bankrupt, but it's very much focused just towards war, and the population is not receiving what it needs. They will for sure ensure their own supplies, food, water, whatever they need. After all, they have the weapons. And the final battle, expending all weaponry, right, when it comes to it, and I believe it very much will. I'd be surprised if they don't do this as they go under, is to bring as much chaos and destruction to the Middle East as possible. Call it a mass jihadi suicide, like a suicide homicide bomber, blowing up as much as he can. The biggest victim will be themselves, right? You have this massive ecological destruction, desolation throughout Iran because of the overpumping of water, the building of 600 dams, much of which were not needed, heavy evaporation, right? Summers it goes up to 50 degrees Celsius, and the waters are exposed. So 50 degrees Celsius is well over 120 degrees. There's really not much left for them to do. They'll make it into the summer. It did rain at the end of the winter season. At the beginning, it did not. And dams are now up to 15 to 20% full, let's say, in the area of Tehran. But by the end of summer, it can't be there. All right? They're going to have to reallocate water supplies. And the question is, how and when can it be done? The civilian population is separated out from the IRGC, and their besieged paramilitary allies. Okay, even in the upper slide, there's a picture of the Iranian army, the Artesh, even there, not getting supplies. We know there were times they have asked, pleaded for supplies, food and water, simple things like that, some ammunition. They only have about 10 bullets per soldier at the moment, if there would be a war. Okay, it's been reported. And those are the ones on the borders. The IRGC won't supply them. They don't trust them. And they have actually, call it like spies, or what would be called in the old days, commissars, like what the Soviets have, to make sure that ideologically they're behaving, but they're not trusted. Okay, so they're out of the picture as well. The best they could do is turn against the regime, but they're not as well trained as the IRGC. The population, we said, is unarmed. So the masses are against the regime. But if you don't have weapons, what can you do? And we saw what happened in January 8th and 9th, in a 2-day period where 40,000, if not more, Iranians were massacred because of protests against the regime, basically on the background of economic issues and the fact there's no water. Thirst demonstrations recently have picked up in the last week or so and also put down with violence, but barely show up in the Western media. Populations will flee in search of food and water. They're not going to have a choice. They're not going to be interested in what happens to the regime. Okay? Even if the good guys came in, so to speak, without food and water, you can't live. Okay? Societal structural breakdown is on the way. The regime does not have to be overthrown. It probably will not be. It simply will sink. And yes, there could be clashes over who's controlling the smaller and smaller amount of military and say what is left of economic power. So the pressure will be on, but a lot of them are internal, even if there was no war at all. And Trump just decided he's keeping the blockade, and that's it. Iran will sink. Now, most likely, there's going to be a third round, as mentioned before. Okay, so let's take a look. Iran's civil disintegration will lead to a massive refugee crisis. We're talking of a population of 92 million, of which even the best estimates are that if Iran had the water supplies that it could have, because the underground wells, are, many of them are dried up, and the aquifers, okay, that at best, they maybe can support a population half the size of the country. Okay, so estimates here, by early autumn 2026, this is when the crash takes place. All right, it may go slower, it may go faster, it could be going slightly slower and then straight down. We don't know for sure. We never do. Okay, the war is secondary to the population. Day zero is spoken about, right, when you have water bankruptcy. And of course, with that, the agriculture and the energy grid, what the Americans are speaking about hitting the energy grid even more. So far, they haven't really hit the grid. They've hit certain supply areas, okay? And of course, the currency is not worth anything. So Iranians have to help each other, more like in a barter system that does work internally. And where are they going to flee to? Well, they're not going to flee to Iraq. Iraq has its own issues. Get to that in a few moments. And where are you going to go? Afghanistan? No. Pakistan? No. Head for the Turkish border. And therefore, have two pictures up here, the crossing from the Turkish border into Iran. You can see what's written in Turkish at the crossing there on the slide on the left. And on the right-hand side, you notice it's a new road, newly being patrolled, that the Turks are building as fast as they can to keep out Iranian refugees. Look, if Erdogan knows it's going to happen and he's nobody's fool, then that is what will take place. So we're speaking of millions, tens of millions, and it's not that they necessarily want to go just to Turkey. You remember, 10 years ago, 2015, 16, the flight from Turkey across to Greek islands in the Aegean Sea, and then all the way up into the European Union. And we know the European Union is not in the same place that it was a decade ago when it comes to absorbing refugees. Merkel, right, who was the chancellor in Germany, her policy of accepting and welcoming refugees is completely out. Today's leadership, led by Merz, Uh, he says, no way, they're going to halt it. And we know there is a right-wing backlash in Europe, a nationalist background saying, wait a minute, our countries have been taken from us due to refugees who are not integrating, but rather want to have sort of like a state within a state. We've all seen it. We all know it. So here we speak about the looming instability and refugee crisis. It will be sparked by what's going on in Iran, as well as the overall drought. Okay, this has a ripple effect, if you can call it that, because there's not going to be much water, of instability and refugee crisis. And when examining the data here about Iran, I said, let's see what's going on in some of the other countries. After all, the weather doesn't know where borders are. It doesn't rain in Iran, but it'll rain in Afghanistan. Okay, it can't happen. And what do we discover? You have this infrastructure, water depletion, and overall societal collapse on its way, not only in Iran, Afghanistan with 45 million, Pakistan 260 million. All right, we hear about floods there, but that's not water you can drink. And then you'll have droughts for years on end, right? Syria has not recovered from its civil war at all. Okay, 26 million. And the Iraqis, even though they have the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, guess what? The Turks control the water supply upstream. Okay, and they want it for themselves. They're building dams. Okay, you have salination of large expanses of the Middle East, making it uninhabitable within the next 10 years. And it's already becoming a serious crisis, not reported in the press. What's in the press, always wars, or of course, stuff about Israel, right? And Gaza and the Palestinians, whatnot. The real story in the Middle East is this. The refugee crisis is on the way. I believe it's tens of millions at least. Could go up certainly to 100 million. Where will they head to? Now, there's only one country in the Middle East that has excess of water because of desalination. We all know that's Israel. Okay. Jordan also has water short, and that brings up the whole question of massive destabilization. Could there be crossing into Jordan on the way here to Israel? Okay. I'm throwing these out as worst case scenarios, but as we know, if you take the last 2.5 years, I think most people gave worst case scenarios beforehand, and it was even beyond them for how negative things turned out. So, what will be the Turkish and Europeans' response? I don't believe they're going to be absorbing refugees, particularly unless the Turks do it and try to force the Europeans to take them. Europe may not be playing that game. As a matter of fact, if they want to survive, they won't. Who could absorb them? Virtually impossible. You have the fears of immigrants and of Islamic extremism, and horrible situation where tens of millions could die. So, how much humanitarian aid it could be supplied? Well, there's simply not enough. You take all the relief agencies in the world, and it won't happen. So, started with Iran, but we've expanded it out. And we know it will go under, and everybody's got to be ready for what's going to happen. And being ready is the whole question. How are we ready for such a disaster? Okay. In future seminars, we will be getting to this as well, because it will directly affect Israel as well as beyond the Middle East, meaning the West. So, thank you, and we'll be taking your questions shortly. We have our credits as usual, right? Whatever we use, we've got to give credit for it. And we have a change in the Naman Academy schedule. We have our countdown to systemic collapse in Iran, today's. Next week, we're going to have student Q&A. We changed the date because on the 31st, we're not going to be doing student Q&A, so we switched them. So you're free. People are free on May 31st. June 7th, we'll go back. We have Q&A again, and our next webinar will be on June 14th. All right, to be announced. We'll see. As much as I'd like to continue with dealing the Middle East here and what's going on with societies falling apart, we may have to deal with a war and its consequences and take a look at that. So we don't yet have an exact topic. The 21st is free, and then on the 28th we have student Q&A for Naaman Academy students. Okay, a few of our free downloads in the digital store. Our ebooks, Islamic Jihad ebook, The Gaza Genocide Lie. I urge everybody to download it, all right? Very important. We renewed it. We added a lot more information. Very useful in those battles online or, at work, at the water fountain, somebody, or just gatherings. If people say something, you've got the facts right in front of you. You can put them on your phone. All right. And of course, on anti-Semitism, 2 parts, and chapters to download from the book Hamas Jihad. Our courses, anti-Semitism, Farah to Facebook, right? Join, learn it. Very, very helpful, and exposing Islamic jihad and safeguarding humanity. First, anti-Semitism goes 10 classes, and exposing Islamic jihad goes 13. We also like to remind people to help us out, become a sponsor, so a partner in doing this research so we can get more and more information out there. Okay, so here we are with the questions and answers. If people would like to discuss, we're here, and we'd love to hear from you. Whatever questions you have, comments, let's go for it.